Hi everyone, welcome back to Metaphysical Egypt. I'm Allan Peoples, again joined by Patricia Awion Lehman. Hi Patricia.
Hey Alan. Okay, so today we're going to start another three-part series called In the Beginning. And it's about the ancient Egyptian Archimedean cosmology. And it's, it sounds like it's going to be boring, but it's not, I promise you. It's so interesting to see how they describe this within their symbolism. And even on this first title screen, you're looking at this image of Nun, right? He is the primordial waters of nothing, right? But, look at him. His body is made up of water. And next to that, you see Atum. He is the original atom. And so we're going to talk about this and the progression from one to the other and, so much more. But it all begins with the womb, right? And the ancient Egyptians, they held the womb to be so sacred. And it was like the most sacred thing. Because why? Because it is the place of creation, right? So, we are going to talk about the womb of the universe. And Hathor does have a part to play in this. So here we're looking, and we're going to see these images quite a bit throughout the series. But Dendera is where they have the temple of Hathor. And again, we've spoken about this before. It's an incredible structured temple. And John Anthony West once called it the womb of time. And this makes so much sense to me. And on the right in that image, you see the birth of form as the face of Hathor, which is just incredible. And she's being born from the womb of Nut. And Nut, we've seen Nut before in the papyruses where we see Shu holding her up with his arms in the ka position. But here you can just see her feet and her legs as they go up and turn around. And she's the watery waveform of the heavens. And she's also the hair of Hathor. So in a way, that whole image is the hair, and Hathor is the face of form. So Hathor is one of the few netters that is both earthbound and of the heavens. Because what is a portal? But you're born from the heavens into physical form. These are the two worlds. And so she represents that portal by being both, the heavens and the earth, which is just incredible. And we're going to talk more about the symbolism of this image, but we're going to start out. You can see I've circled in red on the right. Coming out of the leg of Nut is an indented image of a scarab beetle. And the scarab beetle is basically the seed of consciousness, which is going to jump into the face of form, right? So again, this is a symbol that we're going to see throughout the lecture series, because the scarab, we all know the Egyptian Keper beetle, the scarab beetle. We see it everywhere, scarabs for sale if you come to Egypt. And it is a powerful symbol of the seed of consciousness on a journey of transformation. And then the image on the left, this is the Dendera Zodiac. And it all begins with the scarab beetle, which is also a symbol. Well, on the right, it's the scarab beetle. On the left, it's the crab of Cancer. Mm-hmm. It's also a symbol for the age of Cancer, or the time of Cancer when we move through Cancer in our annual year. But here it can represent both, and it's the center, basically. It's where we breathe out of the center. It begins with Cancer, right? And this is when they celebrated their new year on an annual basis, yearly, when the calendar was created. But it also refers to the great year, and these are all things we're going to talk about as we go. So in the beginning, the breath begins from the womb, and it's pretty intense. And again, you're going to see this image again, but I want to bring it up here because the breath begins with this moment when Osiris as Sa, or Orion, is stepping away from our moment of Un, basically, that highest state of consciousness that we talked about when we are at one with all that is. And you can see, if you look at the bottom where I have the harvest, you see an image of Horus, and he's on a pillar, a lotus pillar, and he's wearing the dual crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, representing the unification of not only the land, but of the two hemispheres of the brain to the two hemispheres of the earth. So this is that moment of complete, this is the 0 point. And next to him, you see Osiris, and he's waving back toward not only Horus, but waving back from the cosmic cow that's on the bark behind Horus. And this is Sophis, it's Sirius, and it's representing here the feminine or the matriarchal cycle of time. And Osiris is stepping out into the patriarchal paradigm, which is based on separation consciousness. And he's standing, he's not mummified. You always see Osiris mummified. Now here, again, he's representing in the heavens, we're looking at Orion and Sirius, symbolizing Isis and Osiris, right? Sophis as Isis, Sirius. Isis was known to be Sirius. Same with Osiris, known to be Orion. And in ancient times called Sa, as we write it today as S-A-H. But he's waving goodbye, and he's on that journey. He is the fool in the tarot deck. In the tarot deck, the major arcana represent the hero's journey that Osiris is about to embark on. Now, we also say with Osiris, the ancient name was Seer, and the Romans and the Greeks called him Asar or Osar. And we today, actually the Greeks even turned it into Osiris. So it starts with Seer, we say Asar, and of course today we know him as Osiris. So again, over time, through cycles, even the labels and the names change. But this is all happening from center, and there's an image of a big hippopotamus known as Taret. And she is basically breathing out the first breath from her womb, her in a way, pregnant belly. And remember, we talked about the mirror in the last presentation, or the last series, and you see, I will show you this again, but where I have the arrow beginning from her belly, basically from her belly button, if you will, you see there's a mare, and Anubis is riding the mare, and this is the path opener for this first breath.
The plow.
And then,
The plow.
The plow, exactly. So you can see that in the little image that I have in the upper right-hand corner. This plow is opening the pathway for the waters, right, to flow from the primordial waters of Nun, from the center. The waters will flow to basically embalm us in this perception of reality as form into separation consciousness. So Osiris takes that step as the fool, ready to embark on this journey. And if you look at the tarot, the card, the fool, you see there's a little dog at his feet. And we always talk about the dog representing Sirius when we study the tarot deck. So again, it is that same image. He's embarking on this journey as if I'm ready to do this. Woohoo! You know, I'm being born into form, and I'm going to take this hero's journey of ups and downs, this sine wave, cosmic serpent journey, and to become one again with my light body, which is, you know, the ultimate goal, as we've spoken about before. So it's really quite fascinating. People say the tarot deck originated with the Greeks or in Mesopotamia, but it quite clearly, in my opinion, goes way back to the Neteru of ancient Egypt, and this expression, this mythology. So one of the most profound, I think, parts of this entire slide is we're looking at him take that first step from the erect lotus pillar. And as he takes that step on the Dendera Zodiac on the left, he takes a 23.5 degree angle, right? And what is that telling us? You know, we know that the axis of the Earth is tilted around 23.5 degrees. And we're going to see this theme as we study the symbolism throughout the series. This is going to pop up over and over and over again, as it does in cultures all over the world. And this is a moment we breathe from our center, from complete balance, from Ma'at, and we breathe out into, you know, this journey of the sine wave, which is a roller coaster ride. We are always trying to find our balance again, and this is a repetitive journey according to the ancients. And again, the ancients worldwide talk about these cycles within cycles within cycles. And in Egypt, that moment when we fall out of Ma'at, we move from being, and if we go back, just to show you this, we go back around the center, there's 36 major Neteru that are playing out this pattern of the Dendera Zodiac, and each Neter represents 10 days of a perfect 360-day year. So if we go further, they call them decans, 10 days, and 3 groups of 10 days represent a month, right? So you would have had these 12 perfect months of 30 days, if you will. And suddenly, when we move that 23.5 degrees, we have 5 extra days in our year for a full 365-day year. And the mythology goes that Thoth, or Jehuti, consciousness, creates 5 Neteru to explain what they call the 5 epigenomial days of the 365-day year. And so the mythologies of these 5 Neteru are a metaphor for the history of our world out of Ma'at. And these 5 Neteru are Osiris, Isis, Nephet, her sister, their brother Set, and the son of of Osiris and Isis, who is Horus.
Unbelievable.
Isn't that incredible?
No,
so when we talk,
north, south, east, and west, and the sun rising.
Well, it's so many things, but it's also all of the mythologies combined to tell us what this means. This is all about our world out of balance, but that means we also had a world imbalance. You know what I mean? We move back and forth, tick-tock, a world in balance into a world out of balance over and over and over again. So we can at least have faith that we're going to leave this, and I think we've hit rock bottom. But, you know, when we look at these stories, it's an incredible story, and the way it's told is really, it becomes the dogma in world religions. It becomes obviously the mythologies, not only in Egypt, but in cultures all over the world. And they're explaining what's occurring to us now. And it's not only just here on Earth, but it's explaining what's happening in the heavens as well.
Because everything is fractal.
Exactly. And so here we're looking at this tilt of the earth. And in Genesis, it actually says, and God said, let there be light in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And we only have 4 seasons because we are tilted. There is a tilt of the earth. So it creates the agricultural seasons, which we're going to talk about. How many mythologies worldwide are based on a seed, agricultural processes? So many. And definitely in Egypt, in South America, and again, many other places in the world. And so we've talked about precession. I will talk about it a little in the next couple slides. So you have precession, the understanding of precession, and Allan's been on my case to talk about this. And it is important. I've been studying it for so long. I think everybody knows what precession is. But people keep knocking me on the shoulder and saying, Patricia, could you explain what you're talking about? And it's an incredible pattern that the earth plays out as it moves in this as it's tilted, it's still spiraling and turning, right? And all the planets are moving around it. But as the tilt of the Earth moves, the tilt changes, and it draws out this incredible circle in the heavens, which we call the circumpolar stars. And it's wherever the Earth is pointing is our pole star, our northern hemisphere pole star. And later on in the series, we'll talk about, the possibility of a southern pole star, but we look up to define who we are. And that is in this perception. But what if we look down at some time? So we will take a look at that possibility in the future, but let's keep it simple now. So this precession, this circle around the heavens, takes place, they say, a complete circle of the spin of the Earth's axis takes place about every 26,000 years, give or take. I've heard 24,000, again, give or take. There are a lot of theories about this. However, we're looking at, a half cycle being about 12,000 years between when the pole is Polaris and when the pole is Vega, which I'll show you in the next slide. And Colin Smith says this might help you to understand a little more. In compiling his famous star catalog, completed in 129 BC, the Greek astronomer Hipparchus noticed that the positions of the stars were shifted in a systematic way from earlier Babylonian or Chaldean measures. This indicated that it was not the stars that were moving, but rather the observing platform, Earth. Such a motion is called precession and consists of a cyclic wobbling in the orientation of Earth's axis of rotation with a period of, he has here, 25,772 years. Precession was the third discovered motion of the Earth after the far more obvious daily rotation and annual revolution. Precession is caused by the gravitational influence of the sun and moon acting on the Earth's equatorial bulge. To a much lesser extent, the planets exert influence as well. And I think it's fascinating that so many ancient cultures were aware of precession, and not only that, they were aware of the profound significance of where we were pointing in any given moment. Where is Osiris, right? I'm going to ask that a lot. And we are pointing, as many of us know, to Polaris as our pole star today. But what does that mean? And again, we're going to answer these questions as we move through the series. So I've talked about the great year a lot. This is the great year that I've been talking about. Some people call it the Platonic year because Plato introduced it quite a bit in his writings. Manly P. Hall, here in The Secret Teachings of All Ages, you might be familiar with his book, one of his books. He says, to the Egyptians, the sun was the symbol of immortality, for while it died each night, it rose again with each ensuing dawn. Not only has the sun this diurnal activity, but it also has its annual pilgrimage, during which time it passes successfully through the 12 houses of the heavens, remaining in each for 30 days. Added to these, it has a third path of travel, which is called the precession of the Equinoxes. This is the great year, in which it retrogrades, and when he's saying this, the spin of retrograde or of precession is opposite. We go the opposite direction through the zodiac signs than we do when we spin through an annual year, dual opposing wave spin. So it retrogrades around the zodiac through the 12 signs at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. So basically, one age can take approximately 2,107 years, give or take. And again, some people point out that some of the constellations are bigger and others are smaller. So again, maybe some give and take on the amount of years per age. But when we talk about the age, or you heard the song, The Age of Aquarius, this is what they're talking about is, how we precess backwards through the zodiac signs, about a little over 2,000 years for each age. And of course, today, we have been in the age of Pisces, but we have been gradually precessing into Aquarius. And people want to say, what day are we going to be in Aquarius? And it's not a moment in time, it's a process. It's happening. If you've ever heard of when they ask what zodiac sign are you, and you're born around the 21st or 20th or 23rd of any month, they say that you're on the cusp, right? You're a little bit of both signs on either side, right? And so that's sort of like the moment we're in. We're sort of, you know, a little bit of Pisces and moving right into Aquarius. And things are changing rapidly. And I think we're all in agreement on that. Well, and here's another way of looking at it. So here's that circle in the heavens, right, of the precession, looking at it from, you know, bird's eye view, looking down. And I have at the bottom, you are here. Here's our map, right? So as I said, we're at Polaris, and that's the Little Dipper. It's the very end of the ladle of the Little Dipper that star is Polaris, which is really fascinating. And the funny thing about the Big Dipper, and I'm going to talk about this a lot as we move forward, is the Big Dipper is always pointing to the pole star. That's another way of how we tell time, by looking at the Big Dipper.
Mm-hmm.
I just showed you Taret in the center of the Dendera Zodiac, right, as the ecliptic pole. Well, she is in many ways, she's sort of like the Big Dipper with Draco on her back. She's that, you know, conglomerate of two that's also always telling us where we're at in any given moment, and why she's the center of the zodiac.
And she's often depicted, you know, with a crocodile on her back.
Well, that's, yeah, Draco is the crocodile. He is the, you know, in Egypt, Draco was a crocodile. Sometimes he's the big serpent, sometimes he's a dragon. But you can see he's a big sine wave in the heavens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cosmic serpent. This is powerful symbolism, and it's why it's used for everything. All the dragon stories in China and in you know, in the Far East and in the UK, that they speak about, this all is speaking to Draco and the path of Draco in the heavens. They're not worshiping these symbols, these Neteru, these forces of nature. They were telling us the story of who we are and what's happening in any given moment. It's not just where we came from, but it's where we're going and where we've been. Fascinating. I mean, it's incredible.
Everything is cycles within cycles, so we will arrive there again eventually.
Exactly. So within their symbolism, they tell us, like I said, it's not just this is where we were, you know, 5,000 years ago. This is where we were. This is where we were before that. This is where we're going. They tell us the whole story and the fractal patterning of the mythology. And this is what I'm trying to express in these presentations as best I can, because it is profound and it seems complex, but once you see it several times, which I'm hoping to do, you'll see it everywhere. You'll begin to know within any mythology, because it's presented in similar ways globally, cross-culturally. So here we are, we're at Polaris on the bottom on the right-hand side, and that's showing you, today it's showing us, I have us circled between Pisces and Aquarius, and it's because that, you know, they have that arrow pointing, this is the spring equinox today, and it's in March, right? And it's that moment, you know, in between Pisces when Aquarius becomes Pisces. That is the spring equinox today. So they call it the precession of the equinoxes based on where the sun's rising in the east on the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, right? As I said, everything is an expression of looking up today in this paradigm. And it's quite possible it was an expression of looking down at one time. And if you look at opposite either circle on either side, we go back, and that moment about 12,000 years ago, we were pointing toward Vega, right, in the constellation of Lyra. Some people say Lyra.
That's
right?
the blue star you have up there.
That's the blue star I put there because it shows us where we were at our height of consciousness, and we're at rock bottom right now, right? And here they show you it was right about at Leo, right? So
Which is the opposite of Aquarius.
exactly. And that's why I keep saying the Aquarius, Leo, it's a portal, because this is when everything reverses. So again, keep with us, keep with me, because I'm going to show you all of this and how it happens. But there had to be a first time, right?
Oh, and I just realized the lion with the water coming out is also a cross symbol of Aquarius and Leo.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah, that the two lions coming together with the water. It's all about the waters, the primordial waters, the flood at the beginning, right, and the flood at the end. See, it's and when we go to Edfu, you know, they talk about the two global catastrophes, not one. And again, these are things coming. You know, stay tuned. Whoops. So again, tilt of the Earth's axis. When does this all happen? When does Osiris come on the scene in ancient Egypt? Well, the mythology of Osiris is said to begin shortly before the early dynastic period, which was about 3150 to 2613 BC, so basically around 5,000 years ago. Long, long time. And many people today believe he's pre-dynastic. And, you know, just because we call him Osiris today, at one time, as I said, he was Osar. Before that was Seir. And before that, he might have had another name. As I said, Sa was Orion. But that doesn't mean they didn't speak about this mythology, explaining what's, you know, this occurrence, this change in our perception of reality. But again, I want to point out quickly about, and we're going to do a whole presentation on Osiris, but Osiris represents the land and humanity. This is our journey. We are all Osiris. This is really important. And he is the green man. I said this is agricultural, an agricultural understanding. He is earthbound, right? So he's off on that journey to become earthbound, born into form. You know, and this is the moment when gods, the Neteru, become men. This is that moment when Osiris takes that first step of descent into a perceived containment in a physical body that is reflected as the Fool in the tarot deck. So, yeah, incredible. He's the seed planted in the black earth. But let's keep going. So I'm going to talk about the Heliopolitan cosmology because this cosmology speaks to this process as we are, you know, that first breath from nothing, and then Atum, we become Atum as that unmanifested potential begins to imagine life itself. It's Atum, he's our creator, who gives birth to Shu and Tefnut, who we talked about in the last presentations, the last few, and Geb and Nut. There's our four elements, air, moisture, earth, and sky, who then give birth to the five. This is when we fall off our axis. And so Ibra, that beam from the heart of the sun, is Atum. It all begins with Atum, who is the atom, right? He is self-created and arises in the shape of an obelisk-like pillar, the Ben or the mound that arose from the primordial waters in Heliopolis. He engenders by means of his own bodily fluids. To begin the creation of the world, Atum spits out Shu and Tefnut as air and moisture. Shu and Tefnut in turn give birth to Geb and Nut as earth and sky. The cosmos has come into existence, and all the elements necessary for life on earth, sun, air, moisture, land, and sky, are now in place. Before their separation by their father, Geb and Nut were able to produce the generation of Isis, Osiris, Set, Nephthys, and Isis and Osiris in turn produce Horus. So again, this is just showing you how this all comes to be. And the beginning always starts with the end. So when I talk about the end or the end of the world, I'm always talking about the end of the world as we know it. and the beginning of a new cycle. They always knew that everything was eternal, and it's always moving toward an end and a new beginning. And so our separation of heaven and earth that I keep talking about was the last global catastrophe, which followed by Zep Tepi, the beginning, the first time, all over again. So it's over and over and over again. And so a story frequently reproduced in the royal tombs of the New Kingdom and known as the destruction of mankind tells of the first rebellion of mankind, which took place when Ra had become old. This is important. Ra is the sun, when Ra had become old. Afflicted with the miseries of old age and disappointed in his human subjects, he decided to abdicate his earthly throne and ascended into heaven, which now came into existence on the shoulders of the goddess Nut, who had assumed the form of the celestial cow. So this expression of the sun starting out as as a first breath itself, and then rising in the sky and becoming Un, and then falling in the sky toward the west. They understood this as the sun becoming old, but that's a daily cycle, right? And we have the yearly cycle, when the sun is its shortest time in the sky, so we have the winter, the cold, the lower part of our annual cycle. Some would say we fall into winter, and then we spring again into summer. It's still spoken of in the same way. And then we have the great year, and our sun does get old. In their expression, their terminology, the sun gets old or the sun changes. It has a youth and it has an old age. And this again is how they looked at the reign of every pharaoh. He has an early reign when he's out there, and the propaganda is he's out there, taking territories. He's the great warrior, right? And then the rulership gets old, and he needs a resurrection of his rulership, and he undergoes rituals to renew his rulership. So all the patterns, all the cycles were played out in real life.
You could also say the sun becomes old right before it novas.
Well, we are going to do a big series on that. So absolutely, you could definitely say that. So when we talk about, the cycles of the sun, it's huge. And again, I'm sorry that we're going to be repeating ourselves, but I always like to point out, everybody loves it when they see, I say everybody, but so many of us love it when we see 11:11, on the digital clocks, right? 11:11, and something happens and we feel inspired. Well, 11:11 speaks to the cycles of the sun when the sun flips its polarity. It's magnetic. It's magnetic. It has a magnetic reversal, if you will. Just about it's about every 11 years for a full 22-year cycle. There's 22 major arcana. This is the hero's journey. It's the cycle of the sun, right? That's a biggie. Because that's telling us that yes, at some point our sun is going to become its own Akh, its light body. And what Allan just said, it just might micronova or super duper flare, and that would be a big flash, which is spoken about in the mythology, right? This big flash, and everything changes. Global catastrophe and a new beginning, Zep Tepi all over again. So, yeah. But here we'll start with Menes or Narmer. Back to ancient Egypt and our series today. Narmer was considered the first human king. Now think about that. According to the Toran annals, Ptah, Ra, Shu, Geb, Osiris, Set, Horus, Thoth, Ma'at, and another Horus, 11, all of whose names are preceded by the phrase kings of Upper and Lower Egypt, again, the uniters of the two hemispheres of earth, the two hemispheres of the brain, and the two lands, right? Ruled in succession for several thousand years before they ceded the throne to the ox. And the ox, these are light bodies, remember? The ox, or followers of Horus, who it seems can be equated with Manetho's dead demigods, right? So these ox or demigods were succeeded in turn by the dynastic kings. So the demigods, followers of Horus, we spoke about this before, but before that,
Shemsu-Hor.
right, exactly, or the Seshu-Hor. Before that, we were all Neteru. We were the gods that walked the earth, right? And time was perceived differently. They reigned for thousands of years. This is a metaphor for time was perceived totally differently than it is today. And then we have the demigods, and then we fall into form in the time of Menes or Narmer, right? And when we look at these palettes, it also speaks to the world ages of when this happens. If you look at the palette on the right, you see that there's two figures pulling two lions apart. That's Shu and Tefnut, the twins of Gemini, right? This is when we recognize that we're not both, you know, we forget that we're both male and female, that we're completely connected. And that's that first separation. Suddenly I know you're a man and I'm a woman, you know, or vice versa. It's the beginning of the true separation consciousness. And under that, you see Taurus the bull, right? With his foot on top of I always say hostage, because this is when we become held hostage in a perception that we are our bodies, born, right? That's the age of Taurus. So, and at the top, you see the symbols. There's Bat at the very top. Those two, they're like the cosmic cows, but they're not Hathor. It's another version of Hathor. And we'll talk about that later, but Bat is very similar to Hathor, and I believe we're looking at Cancer, and then into Gemini, and then into Taurus, which is the age of Menes, the first human king when we fall completely into form, which means before that, we were gods and then demigods. We were the gods that were able to build these amazing megalithic structures all over the planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
To leave us something. And we created the symbolism that left us this unbelievable understanding of not only who we were, but who we would become and who we will become again. Incredible. So the gods that walk the earth become eternal light beings, or Neteru, as forces of nature. I keep saying gods, but we were the forces of nature, meaning we could shapeshift. We could present ourselves in any way we wanted to. We still do this today, but it's not as spontaneous as I believe it might. And how can we even conceive? And when I say things like this, I'm only speculating. But I believe we could present ourselves however we wanted to, and then we fall into form and present ourselves as we do today, with our individual features, faces of Hathor, which changes, you know, depending on, you know, the point in time, the cycle. So after their earthly reign, the gods passed from a temporal existence to an eternal one. The Egyptians expressed this idea by saying that the gods left the earth and ascended to heaven. Ra, or Re, as mentioned above, ascended to heaven on the shoulders of Nut. Shu removed himself to heaven with his attendants. The gods flew up, went to or with their Ka to their light body. And remember early, or in one of the earliest presentations, I said this was the ultimate goal, is to combine your Ba and Ka to become the light body. I mean, we all want to leave and ascend, you know, metaphorically into heaven, to become one, to unify the two sides, our hemispheres of our brain, or conscious, or resolve our polarity, if you will.
And what happens if you don't?
Well, you keep coming back till it works.
That's the basis of reincarnation.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, they talk about many different things. And of course, as the mythology shifts and changes and it becomes used as propaganda, they talk about the judgment scenes, which we're going to get into when we talk about the Hanuti, when the priests begin to manipulate us through their own, with their own agendas. But, that's why I always like to go to the earliest mythologies and cosmologies, because that's when it's more pristine. And then as we move through the cycles, you really have to sift through, why were they telling us this? And I get all this from Hakim, because he would always say, that's the work of the Hanuti, or that's the lies of the Hanuti, the priests trying to manipulate us. So, and we'll talk about that, I promise. But yeah, we all aspire to this highest state of being. And this is another thing. We go to Abydos on the tours, and we talk about it as being this significant place of pilgrimage, where all of the ancient Egyptians at one point in their lives wanted to get to Abydos. And the reason was, this is where the ancestors were buried. This is where the early kings, I believe, in their perception, it's where the Neteru, the forces of nature, when we were the gods and the Shemsu Hor that walked the earth, this is where they're buried. So they're going to pay their respects to this moment in time. It's to go not only to pay your respects, but to remember yourself, remember who you were and who you actually are. It's a reminder to step into our power. Hakim always said, we just forgot. We still have it. We forgot we have it. Because again, the minute we're born, we're told who we are. We're programmed at birth in this cycle. And so it's basically the hero's journey to remember. So we go back to the place where the memories are held, and this is Abydos. And there's so much at Abydos we're going to talk about. I'm going to do presentations on all the temples, and Abydos, wow, incredible. And the Osirian, ancient complex that speaks to this resurrection. So yeah, we've got lots and lots ahead of us. But yeah. So we promised in the beginning. So here it is. In the beginning, there was no thing, nothing. Just none. Primordial waters of none. A primordial watery abyss. Unmanifested potentials. It's basically just consciousness itself. And that image of none on the right is that same image from the first slide. He is just watery waveform, right? We called that Maya, the illusion, right? It's just existence itself. And in front of him here in this picture, you see there's an eye contained, and that's consciousness. It is just consciousness being, right? And in the name none, you can see there's the three, basically their ends representing watery waveform, right? Energy. But you also see there's an egg there to represent creation. There's an egg in the name of Isis.
An Easter egg.
Yeah, exactly. New
Isis being the East. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Some people say Mother Nature. So yeah, none, unmanifested potential. It's the spiritual center of the universe, of universal thought, as in a way a great central sun. It's just consciousness being, and then suddenly it begins to imagine, and that's this is the eye, and the cycles begin. It's the primordial waters of a feminine womb, silent, colorless, inert, literally nothing, inactive. And then there's the first breath. And And so I love to bring this up. You know, we talked about the age of Aten being the highest state of consciousness. And we have this wonderful word, atonement, which if you break it down is atenment, and it's at one mint. And so it all begins in this moment of at one mint, 0 point, right? That place in the center, you know, and then it exhales into individuated aspects of itself, archetypal forces of nature possessing immortal spirits that through their evolution become co-creators of their own holographic universes, which in turn give birth to fractally vibrating universes of their own. This is separation. Creation is separation, and so on and so on. And then through magnetic attraction, this heart of consciousness inhales or involves back to oneness at one mint, a moment of silence. And Stephen Hawking said this, and I love this: as you move backward in time, then the universe contracts, right? It's a breath. Rewind far enough, and he said about 13.8 billion years. I'm not sure it has to be that long. And the entire universe shrinks to the size of a single atom.
Atom.
Atom. So yeah, Day of Atonement. And this comes from the early Hebrews, right? To resolve polarity. The Day of Atonement, also known as Yom Kippur, was the most solemn holy day of all the Israelite feasts and festivals, occurring once a year, once secularly, right? The high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, that place in each temple where heaven and earth meet, right? To perform elaborate rituals to atone for the sins of the people, coming back into balance, right?
The sin being the sine wave.
Exactly. We have to we have to flatline, right? And then evolve back to the point.
We're all born in sin. We're all matter following the sine wave pattern.
Exactly. And so I love this quote by Walter Russell. I'm a huge fan of Walter Russell, which you'll come to know. And this is titled The Universal One. And he says, I believe there is but one thinker in the universe, that my thinking is his thinking, and that every man's thinking is an extension through God of every other man's thinking. I therefore think that the greater the exaltation and ecstasy of my thinking, the greater the standards of all man's thinking will be. Each man is thus empowered to uplift all men, as each drop of water uplifts the entire ocean. So it tells us about our own responsibility throughout our own breath of life, that we are all connected and we are all affecting everyone else. And if we keep this thought alive as we live each day of our lives, we might be more cognizant of what we express and even think, because our thoughts, even our thoughts, are affecting everyone around us. So when they say, let's all be lighthouses, you know, it's a significant statement.
It's like the 100th monkey phenomenon.
Exactly. If we want to change the world, then we need to change our attitudes. You know, we have to stop bitching and moaning, excuse my French, but, you know, it's time that we look for the joy in life, that we appreciate the beauty in what's in front of us, instead of focusing on everything that's not right. You know, if we're always thinking of how out of Mott we are, how will we ever get back to our center? And so I bring this other image on the right. It's two hieroglyphs. They're both S, so it's SS. And Stephen Mailer told us that Hakim pointed out to him, and this particular picture comes from the place that Hakim pointed this out to Stephen Mailer, which was Abu Sir, and I was there with Stephen. But he said these two glyphs represented the sound or tone zim, And he said it was primordial consciousness. It's the beginning. It's where everything happens, as the SS and the Alpha and Omega, if you will. So interesting. And so I show this to point out, you know, you're basically connecting the two waters to become one again, the two hemispheres of the brain. It's even DNA, right? It's the Kundalini serpents that rise up through our chakras, you know, the raising our levels of awareness to become one again. Really beautiful. Could talk about that for a long time. So yes, it's the Holy Grail. You know, the Holy Grail is the heart, our primordial egg of unlimited potentials, the still point of our turning world. The search for that still point is a perennial spirit quest, one that has inspired seekers since time immemorial. I always think of King Arthur's knights and all the stories of the Holy Grail. If we can rest in that stillness, the sages say, we will find the peace that surpasses all understanding. For in that peace and colorless stillness, we can find gnosis, our highest state of consciousness. And it is why we are encouraged to go within and meditate. You know, some people can meditate a lot easier than others, but finding that still point within is what brings us back to our center, and lifts us to really become, you know, to know again, to have those aha moments, to find the clarity that we're all seeking. But let's get back to Atum, right? Atum, creation, the eye. So there's the point within the circle, right? And that point within the circle is an incredible symbol because it represents the sun, right? It's the symbol for the sun in Egypt. But it's also, you know, the point in the center and the expression, the breath out to all the individuated aspects of self. It's the center of a torus field, right? And this cyclical time that is not linear, right? And it is Atum. It is Atum, breathing out into all the separated aspects of himself. In the creation myths, Atum first appeared from the infinite waters of Nun, the void, onto the primeval mound before heaven and earth were separated. He is the point. From his semen, he metaphorically creates the universe as the 360 of Neteru. Due to the friction of his innate polarity, sound as thunder, the word of God, and light as lightning, he breathes the first breath, vibration of flowing life as waveform. The flowing cycles of energy spiral into the illusion of form, which can be measured to define time and space. There you have it.
Sounds a lot like the Big Bang Theory.
Exactly. But what the Big Bang Theory misses is the inhalation. They just think we're going to separate and expand out into, you know, endless nowhere.
Forever. They don't take into account the breath back in.
Exactly. And everything alive is always an inhalation and exhalation. Always. It wouldn't make sense if it wasn't this. And Walter Russell speaks about this a lot. You know, you reach that point where everything has to turn, reverse, and come back to center. It can't be any other way. Atum is the point, right? And the point rotates and breathes out into physical form. This is how our perception of form begins. This is creation. Watery waveform creating sacred geometric shapes that become our perception of form. Liquid light becoming form. Torus field. It's all about the torus. So I'll say it again. The torus functions as an energy torsion animated coil that stabilizes an accumulation of cycling frequencies. It starts as a simple pattern of rotating energy into which other frequencies are introduced and incorporated, gradually making a full, complex, and integral cycle. This cycle of geometric spin, which spins out the top to the bottom in clockwise and counterclockwise rotation, generates electromagnetic and gravitational waves, both horizontally and vertically. Spin is a fundamental principle in all movement in the universe. It can't be any other way. The waveform comes out, it's breathed out, and it starts to spiral and spin. It can't be any other way. Hue and cry. Every time I think of the netter hue, I always think hue and cry. And hue was the definition of the first sound as a force of nature. Atum was said to have emitted upon ejaculating during his masturbation, this first sound, right? Now, hue is always coupled with Sa, right? Sa was the divine personification of perception. Sa was closely associated, as I said, with hue because together, you know, sound, sine wave, if you have that sound wave, you begin to perceive. This is consciousness. As we kept saying in earlier discussions, consciousness itself exists within the torus field, right? So it comes together as one expression. But hue here expresses as a cosmic serpent. There's a cobra. This is the image of hue as a cobra, right? Waveform. Hathor was sacred sound. That's Hathor, the top of the sistrum. We showed this image in an earlier presentation. Sound is the creative force of the universe. Everything physical in nature reflects light, color, vibration as its nomen or identity. Remember, the face of form is Hathor. We each have a unique sound, right? We call ourselves names, Alan, Patricia, you know, Jocelyn, so many different names, but we have a unique sound that's just us, a tone, a color, right?
Right, even our voice, our face, our fingerprint, our iris, everything is a unique signature.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. The Hathor was also the primordial hand. And we said that Atum created of and by himself, sort of by masturbation, right? And everybody says, but wait, where's the woman in this whole process? Well, it's explained that Hathor was the hand, right? The hand of Atum, right? So she's there. So, you know, Hathor represented the active part of the supreme God, right? He is inert, and she represents the first action that brings that first breath of life. Dating back to a pre-dynastic period over 5,000 years ago, Hathor was the goddess of love, motherhood, birth, joy, and music, and so much more. Hathor's cult, I mean, everywhere was Hathor's cult, held that she was both the hand that aroused the creator and the vital force of his seed, the Ka, right? The coffin text alluded to her role in the formation of the universe, calling her the primeval, the lady of all. Ra created his eye as one of Hathor's manifestations, and Hathor helped him create the world. So Hathor was said to be her own mother. So yeah, she's the great, she is the one that can say, I am all that is, was, or ever shall be. She is the, as I've said before, she is the Alpha and Omega. She is the seed and the womb.
So she's basically everything feminine, everything magnetism.
Yes. She's the Ka, right? The masculine is the L, the electricity. So, and we showed that with Shu and Tefnut, but it's always the same, this masculine and feminine energy, negative and positive charges. Yeah. And it can be explained in elements. There's so many different levels that you can speak about this. But here we have, and this, you know, there is an incredible YouTube video called Symbols of an Alien Sky by David Talbot. And I'm a big fan of David Talbot.
And all the work of the Thunderbolts Project. They do great stuff.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, they are doing such amazing work. I get their newsletter and I watch their videos and keep up to date. It's really incredible. And this is an older program, but I encourage you to watch it if you haven't seen it. And he has these symbols, all except the symbol for Leo there. I have from this YouTube presentation, but it shows, he's showing this breath of life, and he's relating it to even the side lock that the children, and all, both male and female children, were presented or illustrated with the side lock, which was this first breath of life from the center of the eye, right? So it's incredible, and it's a curling breath, right? It said it spirals. It just doesn't come out and in a linear pattern. Everything spirals. It can't be any other way. So, but I like to point out that this first breath is also the symbol of Leo, the age of Leo, first breath. Important. And I am going to do a presentation on the ages and the symbols, and it's incredible. You'd just be blown, your mind blown. So here again, that first breath, sound and light show, if you will. Baal, earlier god, Bel, right? Son of El, electricity. These are all early gods, in Egypt and around all in cultures that surrounded Egypt. He was also called Hadad, the storm god, who would later be associated with providing bountiful rains after hearing his voice, thunder, right? So there's thunder gods all over the world, and they're all creator gods, because that first sound and light show is creation. They were the masters of creation, if you will.
Even Zeus and Odin.
Yep.
Same story.
Yep, Thor. All over the world.
Well, thanks, Patricia. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And check out our website, which is horusrising.com. And we'll see you back here very shortly. Thanks a lot.